She was a political attack operative because, folks, the authoritarian is now here. It's not wannabe authoritarian. It's not maybe authoritarian. It's here.
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today, I've got Professor Scott Lucas from the Clinton Institute, University College Dublin on the show. And just a reminder that you can watch us every day, Monday through Friday on Times Radio's YouTube page, or you can stream us as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Scott, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Hey, great to be back and talking about the circus that never stops.
Well, you and I did a pretty great episode, if I do say so myself, when we broke down another hearing a few weeks ago. So we're going to do that again for our audience. So just so that they know, Attorney General Pam Bondi faced a congressional hearing on Tuesday. There were a lot of takeaways. I'm going to read out a few. We're not going to get into all of them just for our audience, but here's kind of what happened. She was asked about whether the DOJ has been used as a politicized tool to go after Trump's opponents, questions on military strikes on cartels in Venezuela, Epstein in the client list, DOJ reorganization and leadership, National Guard deployment, and so on. The general takeaway from this was that Pam Bondi refused to answer a lot of these questions, while conservatives would actually argue that she brought the receipts. So before we get into the specifics, because we're going to show a few clips of what happened, what was your general reaction to this Pam Bondi hearing?
There weren't no receipts. Pam Bondi was not there to provide any information. She was not there to talk about the work of the Justice Department. She was a political attack operative because, folks, the authoritarian is now here. It's not wannabe authoritarian. It's not maybe authoritarian. It's here. On the same day that Pam Bondi is testifying, the Trump administration is putting the military on the streets of Chicago. They're trying to put the streets on Portland when the sum total of the disorder they talk about are a few dozen protesters outside Immigration and Customs Enforcement and a guy dressed as a chicken and another protester dressed as a baby shark. On the same day that Pam Bondi is testifying, ICE is continuing the sweep of hundreds of thousands of migrants and asylum seekers, not just undocumented immigrants, but legal immigrants who are caught up on this. They are defying court orders to do so. On the same day that Pam Bondi is testifying, Donald Trump's inner circle, because there are rulings that have gone against the Trump administration's power grab, are saying that the justices are illegitimate and are actually encouraging, I would argue, attacks on judges, one of whom, by the way, had her home burned this week, and we wait to see whether that was a deliberately set fire. On the same day that this happens, the Trump administration is continuing to make the argument that there are no restraints on what it can do from Congress or the courts or the states or universities or NGOs. And Pam Bondi is part of that effort with that performance before that Senate Judiciary Committee.
And let's get into the specifics of what has been happening. Now, we can't react to everything, of course, but let's start off with Bondi and Senator Whitehouse's interaction. Senator Whitehouse questioned Bondi over whether the FBI had found any photos of Trump and Epstein's young women. There were reports that these were real. So he's basically just asking, has the FBI seen anything? So we'll throw to that clip.
Let me ask you something else. There's been public reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photos of President Trump with half-naked young women. Do you know if the FBI found those photographs in their search of Jeffrey Epstein's safe or premises or otherwise? Have you seen any such thing?
You know, Senator Whitehouse, you sit here and make salacious remarks, once again trying to slander President Trump left and right, when you're the one who was taking money from one of Epstein's closest confidants, I believe, I could be wrong, correct me, Reid Hoffman, who was with Jeffrey Epstein on multiple occasions. And the senator sitting right next to you tried to block the flight logs from being released. Yet you're grilling me on President Trump and some photograph with Epstein? Come on.
The question is, did the FBI find those photographs that have been discussed publicly by a witness who claimed Jeffrey Epstein showed them to him? You don't know anything about that. Okay?
So, Scott, before we get into that, I want to then kind of show you what Senator Whitehouse tweeted after that. After that interaction, he said, "I'm old enough to remember when Pam Bondi announced that she was going to release the Epstein files because it was just a few months ago." So for anyone wondering what he's talking about, here's the clip of Pam Bondi saying this in February.
I saw your appearance at CPAC with Ben and with Ted Cruz. And one of the things that you alluded to, and this is something Donald Trump has talked about, the DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
So, Scott, your reaction to this interaction with Senator Whitehouse and Pam Bondi and just this entire, I guess, scandal, if you want to call it that?
First of all, let's just go a bit wider because we may not get to all the clips, and there were loads of them. The wider on this is that Pam Bondi is just the latest Trump administration official to go before a Senate or a House hearing and to effectively refuse to answer questions or to try to counter them with disinformation or personal insult. We saw it happen last month with Bobby Kennedy Jr. When he pushed out disinformation regarding the state of America's health, about vaccines, about other preventative measures to try to keep the country safe, when he then slurred and insulted those who were questioning him. As you mentioned, you and I saw it with Kash Patel, who I think is supposedly the FBI director, and his magic cards in front of him, and all he could do was sit and look really, really upset and insult the representatives and the senators. And then we saw Pam Bondi do it yesterday. It's just that Pam Bondi is a little bit more articulate than either little Bobby or Kash Patel are. So Adam Schiff at one point, who is a target of a weaponized Justice Department, by the way, he is one of the ones who Donald Trump has ordered to be effectively persecuted by the Justice Department. Adam Schiff actually summarized it in another clip we may or may not get into, where he just listed the whole areas that Pam Bondi did not respond to. She would not respond to, for example, the Justice Department gutting parts of its operations, including civil rights enforcement. She would not respond to specific questions about where the Justice Department dropped the case against the current Customs and Border Protection head, Tom Homan, even though there is evidence from an FBI sting operation, evidence, not conviction, evidence that he took a $50,000 bribe. Pam Bondi would not answer any questions or responded with insults when asked about Trump's deployment of the military. Pam Bondi would not answer questions about January the 6th, 2021, and Pam Bondi would not answer questions about Epstein, which is where we get to the clip that we talk about. When Sheldon Whitehouse brought up that specific allegation, and here we go for context, there's evidence from Michael Wolff, the author, or a claim from Michael Wolff, the author, that he saw photographs of Donald Trump with girls. Those photographs were shown to him by Jeffrey Epstein from Epstein's personal safe. This came up in the Kash Patel hearing. And of course, Kash Patel, with what we now know is the Hogan's Hero defense, was, I see nothing, I hear nothing, I know nothing. Pam Bondi is asked about this, and she doesn't even bother to discuss the merits of this. She simply turns around to Sheldon Whitehouse and just simply says that you, Mr. Whitehouse, you simply are not serving your constituents and that you're connected. She then finally got to the point of this claim, which was put down, which was, look, in February, you said you were going to release the Epstein's files. And then Pam Bondi, who is a lawyer, by the way, You talk about getting hyper-laundered. Oh, in that clip you just played, well, I didn't say I was going to release. I just said they were on my desk and I was going to review them. Even though in that clip that you play, Maddie, she says, I have done this because of Donald Trump's directive. He told me to do this, right? So yeah, Bondi was there and was put on notice to try to release the Epstein files. And why did they back off from releasing the Epstein files? Of course, that's the question that she would not answer by deflecting for the next few minutes in the hearing, just by simply insulting everyone.
Because in that interaction, no one is saying, oh, there's hard evidence. No one's saying that Michael Wolff's evidence is hard evidence. It was just a question of or not if the FBI had seen photos. Because, of course, as the Attorney General, you should know that. And I guess, she's under oath, so you would assume she can't lie, but you would assume the way that the Trump administration have been handling this, that she would at least come out and say, no, haven't seen anything, which, true or not, but you mentioned that clip of her talking about the fact that she said, I'm going to play out that clip of Pam Bondi on claims from February. She is asked about these claims where she said that she had the Epstein client list on her desk.
Attorney General Bondi, why did you publicly claim to have the Epstein client list waiting for your review and then produce nothing relevant to that claim?
Senator Durbin, if you listen to my entire clip on that, I said I had not reviewed it yet, that it was sitting on my desk along with the JFK files, the Martin Luther King files, and I said I had not yet reviewed it. And if you see our memo on Epstein, you will see, excuse me, our memo on Epstein clearly points out that there was no client list.
That is Senator Durbin basically grilling her. And to play devil's advocate, Scott, my question is that not a fair enough response to say that she had documents on her desk? She hadn't reviewed them yet. She didn't know if there was a client list on there. She reviewed them. She came back. She said there wasn't a client list. Is it not enough?
She was splitting some of those beautiful blonde hairs. I mean, that's what she was doing here. Because look, she's sitting there on Fox News, right? And Fox News was setting up to try to run the attack that there were Democrats who were named in the Epstein files. That was the whole setup, and that's what Trump made the play. Now, there was a miscalculation here. So what the legislators are doing is, let's get back and get away from politics. The legislators on the Judiciary Committee are just simply saying, or at least the Democrats are saying, do your damn job, right? Do your damn job. Look at the Epstein files. Now, Bondi then, and this is really, and like I said, she's much sharper than Kash Patel. She's a little bit harder to pin down on this, because what Bondi says is there is no client list, right? So she gives the implication that she at least had looked at the evidence. And you remember that Kash Patel said, oh, well, I don't know. I was playing golf or washing my hair. She at least says she's looked at the evidence. There is no client list. Now, everybody who follows the Epstein case knows that's not the question here, because they know that what Jeffrey Epstein's doing is he's not necessarily got a magic smoking gun document that says client A, client B, client C, client D. What we know is that Jeffrey Epstein maintained a catalog of a lot of people with whom he had contact. Now, we have seen that catalog, and we know that there are other documents when he discusses people with whom he had contact, people who may or may not have been clients. So what Bondi is saying is there's no client list. Therefore, there's no need to look at any of those other documents. That's where she's gotten to. But of course, although she's quite clever at doing it, this is the one area. Bondi can get away with a lot of the other stuff she did yesterday. She won't get away with this because there's certain Republicans who will not accept that as an answer. We talked about Thomas Massey, the representative.
Scott, we'll get into the nitty and gritty of what's happening with Thomas Massey, but I want to end the Epstein stuff in this hearing. Your takeaway from this, from Pam Bondi's response to any questions about Jeffrey Epstein and his client list, did she do a good enough job to take the heat off Donald Trump when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein? No, because Donald Trump put the heat on himself, and not even Bondi could get away from this. The most significant episode of the week was not Bondi. It was actually Trump when he was asked by Caitlin Collins of CNN about Ghislaine Maxwell. And of course, the open question is, will Ghislaine Maxwell possibly get a pardon because she spoke to the Justice Department and
You either say, oh, she's come clean about what she knows, or you say she's covering for Trump. Anyway, whatever the case is there, Trump, it looks like the kid getting caught with his hand in the cookie jar, because it's like, what? Oh, I haven't thought about her in so long, Jillian. I haven't thought about her for so long. And what's happening there? What did she? What? Donald Trump, who usually plays like he's the genius in the room, all of a sudden becomes the dumbest kid who's never heard anything that's happening. And it looked hinky. It looked like, yeah. And it's still, all I can do is the running speculation right now is that what Trump did was if he says that he's going to pardon her, that looks really, really bad, because it looks like he's trying to cover up that he might be involved, right? If he says he didn't pardon her, then he's going to really tick her off. So what he does is, to try to prevent her from possibly dishing really damaging information, he keeps open the possibility there is a pardon by simply saying, I don't know what the hell's going on.
I mean, yeah, he's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't in this situation. It'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. We're gonna come back to the Epstein stuff and Thomas Massie in a second, but I want to just wrap up kind of what happened in this congressional hearing. One of the more controversial things that Donald Trump has done in his first 9 or 10 months in office is, of course, deploying these National Guard troops to combat crime in certain American cities. So we saw it in Washington, D.C., we saw it in Memphis, Tennessee. Trump has now authorized troops to be sent to Chicago. They have arrived, but he has failed in sending troops to Portland. So Pam Bondi was questioned about the justification of this. So I'm going to play out that clip now.
What's the secret? Why do you want to keep this secret? The American people don't know the rationale behind the deployment of National Guard troops in my state. The word is, and I think it's been confirmed by the White House, they are going to transfer Texas National Guard units to the state of Illinois. What's the rationale for that?
Yeah, Chairman, as you shut down the government, you voted to shut down the government, and you're sitting here, our law enforcement officers aren't being paid. They're out there working to protect you. I wish you loved Chicago as much as you hate President Trump. And currently, the National Guard are on the way to Chicago. If you're not going to protect your citizens, President Trump will.
Scott, does the government shutdown, as Pam Bondi spoke about, have anything to do with deploying National Guard troops to these cities?
They're not there to combat crime. Come on, let's cut to the chase. And I'm going to tell you why I'm cutting to the chase, because certain other people aren't. Those troops had been in Los Angeles. It was not only National Guard, but for a moment it was U.S. Marines. They have been in Washington. They are now in Chicago. In the case of L.A., with one important exception I'm going to tell you about, they mainly just stood around. In the case of Washington, D.C., they mainly went to low crime areas. Some of them even planted flowers, because another part of Trump's effort is, I'm going to make Washington the most beautiful city in the world, right? And when it comes to Chicago, we remain to see what happens, because we know from the statistics that there was no case to send the National Guard into any of those cities. And I can walk you through that if I will. I know that our friends in the YouTube comments who are the dedicated Trumpers are the facts, they're impervious to that. The one thing that the National Guard are doing is they're providing support for the folks who are breaking the law and who are carrying out unauthorized military-style operations, who are Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So if ICE goes in and starts to sweep people off, if they use excessive force, and if someone gets upset about it or tries to obstruct that, then the military are there now. It's thin end of the wedge. You don't go, even if you're an authoritarian regime, which is what this is now, you don't go in and you don't send in the military to go in and impose martial law in each of these cities. That's not how you start this. What you do is you make it appear normal to have the military on the streets, so that people don't say, look, we really don't want the military there. When it becomes normal for the military to be on the streets, then they can take on any role that you want them to have. They can support ICE. They can support other law enforcement. They could at some point start to begin their own operations. So you just open up that possibility. That's where we are. And Bondi, she wasn't going to, there's that, when she is asked, it was Dick Durbin who asked it, look, were you involved in a meeting to discuss the deployment of these troops? to Chicago, which is in Durbin's constituency. He's a senator from Illinois. Were you involved in that? And she says, you're horrible. You're a horrible man who doesn't represent his constituents. If you spend as much time loving Chicago as you do hating Donald Trump, that would be a service to mankind. No, that's not the question, Pam. Were you involved in that meeting? Were you or were you, like Kash Patel quite often is, washing your hair? Where the hell were you? So that, like I said, Bondi is effective in terms of what she's doing. And this is what really ticks me off. She was so effective that the New York Times, which should know better, what's their headline today? Bondi goes on attack. No, the headline New York Times is Bondi diverts, deflects, avoids answering questions. Their subheadline is the session featured more fireworks than facts. Well, why did it feature more fireworks than facts, New York Times? Because she deceived, she insulted, she misled. Part of the problem that we're having here, Maddie, is these hearings are becoming spectacles, and some major U.S. outlets are munching popcorn rather than do your damn job.
I mean, and that's not even a new thing, because even under the Biden administration, where there were numerous congressional Senate hearings, they really were spectacles. So it's not just a Republican thing. It's on both sides of the aisle. But Scott, you mentioned this, troops, military personnel in the streets. It's a slippery slope. It's very dictatorial. It's very authoritarian. And you and I have spoken at great lengths about, these are authoritarian countries that have troops walking the streets. So it will be interesting to see how this unfolds. But I want to move off the congressional hearing because there's so much involved. Anyone who wants to go back and listen to it, very much advise you to do so. But back on the Epstein stuff, look, there's so much divide right now within the Republican Party over these Epstein files. Thomas Massie has been leading this charge. He is trying to force a vote in the House to release the Epstein files. He has 218 votes, the number that he needs to force a vote. He also has dubbed this House recess. So Mike Johnson has put the House on a recess for an extra week. He believes that Johnson has done this in order to delay swearing in a newly elected Democratic Congresswoman, being Adelita Grijalva. They believe that she's actually a crucial vote towards this Epstein files release. Mike Johnson tweeted that he and Trump are actually for maximum disclosure and want to protect innocent lives related to the Epstein victims. So here's what Massie responded to that. He said, contrary to what he says, Speaker Johnson is doing everything he can, including delaying the swearing in of the most recently elected member of Congress and spreading misinformation about the legislation to block a vote in Congress on legislation to release the Epstein files. Democrat Congressman Ro Khanna backed this up with, we secured the 218th signature. The press conference was scheduled. Epstein victims were ready to speak. So what did Republican leadership do? They sent us home during a shutdown. So your reaction to this, Scott, is this the truth? Is this a massive power play from Republicans in charge, mostly Mike Johnson, who is delaying this vote, delaying House Republicans from having these files released?
You just summarized it really well, Maddie, which is Adelita Grijalva wins a special election in New Mexico to take up her seat in Congress. It is now more than 2 weeks since she won that seat. The normal procedure is that within a day or two, the representative who wins the election goes to Washington. They are sworn in, because you don't want that seat to be vacant. Mike Johnson, as the House Speaker, refused to have the swearing-in ceremony. He refused to do it for a few days, saying perhaps that he was washing his hair. That seems to be a common theme right now. But then he said, it's the government shutdown that's preventing it from happening. No, the government shutdown does not prevent you from swearing in Adelita Grijalva, because you can have the House of Representatives in session, like the Senate is in session right now, during the shutdown. So Mike Johnson is protecting Donald Trump by refusing to swear in Grijalva, who would be the 218th vote that is needed to force, in other words, to call for the release of the files. Now, I need to emphasize that would not necessarily lead to the release of the files, because, of course, the Senate would also have to support that as well. So what Johnson's doing here is it's not even that he's blocking the release of the files at this point. That's not like it's imminent. He's just refusing to do one step of the process because he doesn't trust, and this is the key takeaway, Maddie, he doesn't trust the Republicans in the Senate would block. In other words, there may be enough Republicans in the Senate who also think the file should come out. So Mike Johnson's running a little bit scared. Donald Trump, he won't admit it, but he's running a little bit scared. And you can link what Pam Bondi did yesterday with what Johnson's doing as part of this wider issue. And again, just to emphasize why is this big issue, Maddie, all these other issues we talk about, including being an authoritarian government, that might not matter to a lot of Trump supporters. This one does.
Yeah. Now let's move on to another thing that happened. It happened in the congressional hearing, but it's more of a headline taking shape this week. One of the big things that's happened this week is that Chuck Grassley revealed that the FBI targeted 8 Republican senators' personal phones as part of the Arctic Frost investigation into efforts to overturn the 2020 election. FBI Director Kash Patel said that the unit of agents who were involved in this investigation had been dismantled. Bondi called it an abuse of power when she was asked about this in the congressional hearing, but she also declined to point fingers or reveal any internal action going on at the FBI. So, Scott, can you walk me through this? So if this is true, is it a huge scandal the way Republicans would say it is, or is it not actually a big deal where this wasn't essentially phone tapping and it was essential to Jack Smith's probe into these claims about the 2020 election?
It's part of the Trump administration's attempt to escape accountability and to tear down the justice system. It is disinformation, which happens to be carried out by a Trump ally, the 92-year-old Chuck Grassley, who continues to serve in Senate, in part to help protect this administration. Let's explain why, Maddie. I think everybody remembers January the 6th, 2021. At least I hope people do. And they remember that the U.S. Capitol was attacked that day and that legislators were threatened. The Vice President, Mike Pence, was threatened with execution by Trump supporters, that these people were in hiding that day, that it took hours to resolve the situation, and that this followed Donald Trump calling on his supporters to march on the Capitol to block the confirmation of Joe Biden as the legally elected president, following months of trying to overturn the 2020 election. That's the scenario. Now, the FBI investigates the Capitol attack, as it should do. Who were involved in these violent acts? Was there an organized attempt to storm the Capitol? Now, to do that, they have to call up evidence. There were a number of U.S. representatives and senators who had been involved in Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 election. This doesn't mean they were guilty of trying to overturn it, but they were involved. Trump had spoken to them. Trump, in some cases, had pressured them to overturn the election. There are at least 2 senators who were amongst the 8 names that Chuck Grassley released yesterday, who Trump had called to press them to overturn the election. Ron Johnson is one of them, and then there's senator from Pennsylvania, representative from Pennsylvania as well. Now, what the FBI did is, as part of the investigation, is they subpoenaed or asked for the call logs of these representatives and these 8 senators. Now, a call log, as you know, Maddie, as a journalist, simply is just, it records who called into these people, who did they call. It does not have the content of the conversations. It is not a wiretap. That's not a wiretap. That's a request for calling. The FBI, in other words, acted legally through the system to subpoena the call logs to find out if there were conversations that may have taken place between Trump and legally elected senators as part of an attempt to block Biden's confirmation, which may have been connected with those who were committing a violent act. If the FBI had not done that, they would have been negligent. So what do Trump and his supporters do? Trump and his supporters, who are now in the process of using the Justice Department as basically political attacks, a political weapon They have weaponized the Justice Department against their opponents. How do they cover up the fact they're doing it? They accuse the other side of weaponizing the Justice Department. No, not us, it's them. So at the same time that Chuck Grassley is putting out this disinformation to smear the FBI, who has Donald Trump called upon to be criminally prosecuted or persecuted? Amongst them, Jack Smith, the special counsel who legally and respectfully and appropriately investigated the events leading up to and including January the 6th.
It's a lot to take in, and, you know, both parties definitely weaponized the DOJ. That has to be said. I wouldn't say that, but it is an interesting situation, and it is...
Stop, Maddie, stop. You're brilliant. I love you. But don't both sides this one. Let's treat each of it on its merits. You and I have discussed this.
I'm impartial.
Impartial doesn't mean you have to be both sides. We can say, for example, that there are questions about whether members of the Biden administration leaned on the Justice Department to go slow on Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, when you had issues such as the Biden laptop, Hunter Biden's laptop. We can discuss that. And I think we can talk about the fact that if members of the Biden administration did that, that's inappropriate. They shouldn't have done it. You know, for whatever reason they were doing it. They did that. That's different from saying the Biden administration was using the Justice Department as a political weapon to go after Republicans and to go after Donald Trump. The fact of the matter is the Justice Department went after Donald Trump. The New York Attorney General went after Donald Trump. The Manhattan District Attorney went after Donald Trump. The Georgia District Attorney went after Donald Trump because there was evidence that Donald Trump committed crimes. That's why they did that. So what the Biden administration may have done in the Joe and Hunter Biden case should not be elevated to be an equivalent.
It's not comparable. I just mean that from my extensive covering of the Biden administration, all I'm saying is that they used the DOJ to their advantage to help Hunter get out of this. This was a 5-year investigation into crimes committed by Hunter Biden, and they slow walked the investigation numerous times. And you know what? Chuck Grassley had a part to play. He actually had some incredible whistleblowers come forward. We don't have long, so I want to finish off. Sure. On a kind of a bizarre note, you and I have spoken off camera about this. India is holding a Hindu festival this week where a Hindu goddess slays a demon. This year, that demon will be depicted as Donald Trump. There's photos going around. Anyone should go look at it. But look, I'm gonna say this in conjunction with the fact that Narendra Modi posted a very enthusiastic, warm birthday greeting message to Vladimir Putin yesterday, which was just insanity. So I can't help but feel right now the US-India relations are severing this week, Scott.
Yeah, I can't wait to see Pam Bondi go after Narendra Modi and accuse her of being part of the deep state plot against Donald Trump. You know, that's going to be fun. Look, the specific incident is, and I've been introduced to this by Indian friends who are from Mumbai, which is where the Indian goddess Durga Puja, and forgive my pronunciation, my Indian friends for that. You know, there's this annual ceremony where she slays the demon, right? And to see the demon, it's like, okay, usually we have the real demon here, but this year's guest demon is going to be a giant effigy of Donald Trump, right? And you go, wait a minute, how do you get to this point, which is only 8 months after Narendra Modi was in Washington and he and Trump are being best bros, right? You know, how does it sink to this level? And it really is a case that amidst the bullying and the narcissism and the ego of how the Trump administration has thrown away an alliance. You know, and again, we can talk about the reasons why. A lot of it has to do, going back to April, India, Pakistan have a scrap. They both back off. The Pakistanis go to Donald Trump. They go, we love you, you're brilliant. We're going to get you the Nobel Peace Prize. Modi doesn't call Trump. He doesn't say, oh, thank you. Because Modi doesn't believe that Trump is the reason why people backed off. Ever since then, Trump has just been loaded to go after the Indians. And so he runs up the tariffs to 50% on them. He charges, up to $100,000 per H-1B visa. Well, that affects a lot of Indian professionals who are hoping to work in the United States. And so India looks at this and says, well, do we necessarily need to go on bended knee to Donald, or can we leverage our other relationships? One of those relationships is with Russia. The Trump administration tried to bully India into stop buying discounted oil from Russia. Now, I think India should stop buying oil from Russia. I think the way the Trump administration went about it was absolutely ham-fisted. So what does India do? It says, India, which was actually on the verge of decreasing its oil sales from oil purchases from Russia, says, well, no, we're not. And Narendra Modi is going to go see Vladimir Putin in a few weeks, right? And meanwhile, Trump, I think Putin turned 74, and Modi makes sure to say, I hope you live a long life, when there's other peoples who may not be so well-wishing about Vladimir Putin having a long life, despite the fact, another fun story to discuss on the next podcast, that Putin is trying to become immortal by seeking these magic remedies to extend his life, as he told Xi Jinping just a few weeks ago.
Unsurprising. I was waiting for a story like that to come out. Scott Lucas, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report.
Thank you, Maddie. Look forward to the next one already.